with us recording? All right, perfect. All right, let me share my screen. Actually, this. All right, so thank you guys for joining us here today. I'll start first by letting everyone know who I am and what MBA Growth Partners does. I am Mac Audina. I am the CFO and General Counsel of MBA Growth Partners. We are a management consulting firm specializing in strategic planning, operational efficiency, systems implementation. We also help out with cannabis license application, 280E tax accounting. Some of you will know what that is. Others of you will come to find out soon. So MBA Growth Partners puts together a series of webinars called Growth Theories, where we get business leaders to come in and tell us some of the strategies and tactics that they have used to achieve a certain level of growth and success, with the hopes of helping our audience members to use similar tactics and to achieve similar levels of growth and success. And so this time around, we are focusing on the cannabis industry, and particularly in social equity. And for those of you who may not be familiar with what social equity is, it is a concept and a set of policy initiatives and considerations that are aimed at essentially addressing some of the history around justice in the cannabis space, where people of Black and Brown communities have been unfairly and unevenly targeted, unfairly and unevenly arrested and prosecuted. And so, I'm very excited about this because, MBA Growth has worked with a number of community development financial institutions, primarily to help people of the Black and Brown community to, bring some business know-how so that they can become viable and they can become successful and profitable. And so it's with this same idea that we want to support, individuals in this community to help to make sure that they are successful and viable when they do come into this industry. Very, very excited about the panelists that we have today. These are individuals that are very successful in their field, and they are providing their time free of charge. And this is very valuable time. So you guys, are very lucky to be getting all of this information. People pay hundreds of dollars to go to conferences for the information you'll get here. And you're getting that information only because everyone here is very much interested in the social equity space and they're giving their time. So very excited and very grateful to have our panelists here. All right, so quickly, this is what we'll be going through for the agenda. So from 12 to 12:10, just, making sure that we have everything in line, doing some introductions as we are doing right now. My welcome message was here. We will also hear from two of our co-sponsors who is helping us to put this together. And then from 12:15 to 1:15, we will do our panel discussion. And from 1:15 to 1:30, we will allow for the Q&A session with the audience. All right, so the first co-sponsor is Jacqueline Jeter. She is of G2 Insurance, and I will let Jacqueline Jeter provide information on her company and the services that she provides.
Good morning, everyone. Oh, technically afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad that we're all here. We're all here because we have a passion for this industry, this burgeoning industry, and everyone here wants to learn, wants to understand what's happening nationally and where they can find their place in this industry. Insurance, and also the financial services system and industry as a whole, is usually late coming to the plate. It's usually trying to catch up. It usually has products that are years behind, let's just be honest, and it's usually trying to figure out where it should fit in. And insurance is no different because it's about risk management. G2 Insurance is a little different because we're based out of San Francisco with an office here on the East Coast. I run G2 East and offices in the Midwest. We have a separate entity. We developed an additional entity called Emergent Risk. and you can even look it up on emergentrisk.com, that addresses cannabis industry, that has talking points on cannabis industry, issues related to the cannabis industry, and products that we've created for years to help and grow the cannabis industry. The most latest is cyber and directors and officers. We've worked with insurance carriers to create some of the necessary coverages. Have we done everything that can be done? No, there's a lot still to do. It's a growing industry, and insurance is a growing marketplace for that. The only thing I want you to listen to today is every single person on this panel, because they're experienced, and make sure that we all know not to self-insure when you decide to go into this business. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Jacqueline. And we also have Jonathan Wax of the law offices of Offit Kurman. So I will allow Jonathan to give a little bit on his services as well.
Hey, Mac, thank you. I tried to turn my camera on. It said that the host disabled the camera, so I don't know whether you can fix that. It doesn't really matter. People tell me that I have a face for radio. So either way, it's good. I am a principal with the law firm of Offit Kurman. I'm the founder of our cannabis practice. We have been around in the cannabis world since 2016. Offit Kurman is a full service firm with 250 attorneys in 9 states from New York to South Carolina. Our headquarters is here in Maryland. I do think that it is essential for operators and applicants to focus on social equity initiatives, social diversity requirements with respect to applications in the expanded programs and the new programs. As adult use comes to a lot of the states in our area, the efforts to bring adult use to these states are going to be inextricably tied to social equity initiatives, and those applicants and operators that best understand the nuances of each state program will get the advantages and the extra resources that they deserve. So please do feel free to reach out to me or to others in the cannabis group at Offit Kurman. If we can provide you in any way with information, with legal resources, with connections, with ideas, we would love to talk to you. Our website for the cannabis group at Offit Kurman is cannabisisok.com. Cannabis is okay, not okay as in mediocre, but okay as in Offit Kurman. So please do feel free to reach out. We'd love to hear from you. We've been helping a lot of growers and processors and dispensaries and testing companies and landlords and other ancillary businesses for quite some time. We have a lot of at-bats. So thank you. Back to you, Mac.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Appreciate all of your support. All right. Now we are going to provide you with some information on the illustrious panelists that we have here. So right now we're looking at Kevin Goldberg. Kevin Goldberg is the founder and founder of gLeaf Medical, aka gLeaf. He served as gLeaf's president and general counsel from 2014 until gLeaf merged with the publicly traded multi-state operator Columbia Care, Inc. in June 2021. Mr. Goldberg led gLeaf's effort to win licenses organically in Maryland, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Virginia. He played a large role in financing gLeaf's expansion prior to the merger via equity, REIT, debt, and supply agreement transactions. Mr. Goldberg is an attorney licensed in Maryland and Washington, D.C. He graduated at Catholic University Law School, magna cum laude, was an editor of the Catholic University Law Review, and he also served as the president of Maryland's Trial Lawyers Association from 2009 to 2010. Mr. Goldberg is a partner with the law firm of Goldberg, Finnegan, and Cannon, LLC. Thank you and welcome, Mr. Goldberg, Kevin Goldberg. All right.
Thank you, Mac. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. All right. And next we have Liz Wald. Liz Wald has spent the past 25 plus years building online global presence. with careers that span the early days of AOL and Etsy to the explosion of crowdfunding with Indiegogo to using innovative technologies and approaches to disrupt existing supply chains. Liz moved into cannabis through her role as Chief Strategy Officer at Good Earth Organics, which makes certified organic soils and nutrients optimized for growing cannabis. Liz is an investor in the ArcView member managed fund and is an investor in several startups in the cannabis and technology industry. Welcome, Liz.
Thanks, great to be here.
All right. Okay, and finally we have Hope Wiseman. Miss Hope Wiseman is the CEO of Mary Maine, and she is an entrepreneur, business strategist, and cannabis industry's trailblazer. At the age of 25, Hope established Mary Maine in her hometown of Prince George's County, Maryland, becoming the youngest female Black cannabis dispensary owner in the United States. A graduate of Spelman College in Atlanta, where she majored in economics in hopes of becoming an investment banker, Ms. Wiseman worked for SunTrust Robinson Humphrey upon graduation. Less than a year later, Hope reassessed her path and found herself coming back to her true purpose to help Black people in her community and across the country through her entrepreneurial spirit. In September 2018, she opened Mary Maine with her mother, Dr. Octavia Simpkins Wiseman, and Dr. Larry Bryant, in a limited licensed medical market in Maryland. Her vision to create opportunities for Black, Indigenous, and people of color who have been disproportionately affected by the war on drugs and excluded from the cannabis business ownership drives her passion for the industry. Welcome, Hope.
Thank you, thank you.
All right, let me now, without further ado, let's get started on the panel list and the panelist questions. So this is a question for all of you, and what we'll do is we'll work our way backwards. So for Hope, to Liz, and to Kevin, the question is, so we do have a group of individuals who are looking to get into the cannabis space, people who are looking at their own states and thinking about applying. So the question for all of you guys is, what are some of the things that they should have in mind, some considerations before they apply for a license in their state?
I would say, well, should I start or does somebody
Go
else?
ahead, Kevin.
Start? Okay.
No,
Sure,
go ahead,
Kevin.
Kevin.
I would say you need to have some financing because just putting the application together is going to be very expensive. So you need some seed money, not necessarily a lot, but you can be creative about it. I'll tell you, that when we got started in the industry in 2015, I wasn't in the best financial situation. I'd just gone through a divorce. I scrounged together $25,000. My brother scrounged together $25,000. And that was the money for us initially to, hire a corporate lawyer, get the balls rolling. And then, when we applied, you need to be able to show that you have adequate capital to, run the business. So we felt like we needed to show like $1 million in a bank account. So we raised equity through a private placement memorandum, which kind of lets you sell a chunk of the company in exchange for cash. And we were very creative about it because we hadn't applied for the license yet. So if some of you out there are considering applying but aren't there yet, I'll tell you what we did. And, we wanted to be able to show that we had $1 million in the bank. So in our Series A, we sold we raised $1.7 million. And the deal was everybody who invested would get 80% of their money back if we did not get the license. So we would use 20% of the money for a lobbyist and some lawyer fees, some other expenses. We weren't taking a salary at that time. But that helped us get, I didn't know a lot of like real wealthy people, but it helped us get, a lot of my friends and family to kick in, $25,000 here, $25,000 there. We really scraped it together. Because, when you don't have the license yet, it's kind of a long shot. But if you're able to tell people, look, you get 80% of your money back if we don't win the license, and we, use the other 20%, like I said, for lobbyists and lawyers. You want to make sure you have a great team. We hired consultants to help us with our first application. I personally knew nothing about growing cannabis. We kind of got that expertise from our consultants. You know, I would say talk to everybody. You never know where one conversation might lead to another connection, even if it's not going to help you like right now. One thing always leads to another. You want to, you know, if you're going to be raising money, you want to get your pitch down and make sure that you can, in a very concise way, say what you're trying to accomplish and, you know, sell the proposal and quickly gauge if somebody's interested or not. If they're not interested, you want to move on because time is money. I guess those are my suggestions for early on.
I'd say first, really understand your market, where you are attempting to apply. Every market is very different and the application processes are usually very different as well. I saw there was a question already about New Jersey. So New Jersey is coming up and that's going to be a very competitive market. It will mirror slightly Maryland's process. So it's going to be a competitive, actual merit-based process versus a state like Massachusetts, where you go through a local municipality and the application process is not necessarily competitive in that way. And you don't have to, you know, show all your, you're not being graded kind of on a score of how good your plan is. It's more of like, do you check all the boxes and do they have room for you in that city, you know? So I'd say really understand where you're applying and what you're up against. Like Kevin was explaining, in some states, you're gonna have to show significant amounts of capital to even be competitive. So understand that and figure out ways to be able to prove that capital. Another thing that some people do to be able to prove capital is they'll say to someone that does have the $1 million in their bank account, say, hello, you know, we'll give you X amount of percent if we win, just to show the money in our application. So, you know, we're going to put you down as a 10% equity owner on our application. And if we actually win, then you'll invest the money and you'll have some type of LOI agreement or some type of agreement that's somewhat binding that would be contingent on the money. That's how, or on the application being accepted, winning the license. So that's what some people do. But there are kind of levels to that. So like Kevin was saying, they wanted to have the money in their bank account with their name on it. That's a lot stronger than saying I have this, pretty much like a letter saying that they will give me the money potentially. And then also it depends on how strong that letter is. If it's like a binding agreement versus just somebody wrote you a letter and sent it in with no proof of funds or anything like that, you know, that's not as strong as otherwise. However, the states will accept both. But when you're being, I like to call competitive licensing processes like being graded on a bell curve when it's an open book test. So it's like we could all write the same things, but somebody is going to win and somebody is going to lose. So a lot of those times it comes down to experience, the amount of capital you can prove. Like if me and you write the same application, but I'm able to say I've been doing it for 3 years in Maryland successfully without being, you know, dinged at all, I'm going to score higher on that section than you will. So that's why a lot of times too, you see people partnering with existing operators or hiring them to be consultants, but also using their expertise in the application. So I know that previously when I've helped people apply in other states, that's something that they'll do with me. They'll use my resume as a part of their application and will offer me either monetary compensation or equity to be able to use my experience through their process. So first thing I'm saying is just really understand the market that you're trying to apply in, what type of process it is. If it's not as competitive, you know, you probably can get through it without having to spend too much money. But if it's a competitive process and a highly sought after market, just know you're competing against companies that might spend $1 million applying pre-license. They might spend $1 million hiring every expert that could cover every little piece of an application. They'll hire somebody that has a certification in pest management and pay them $5,000 just to use their resume as a part of their application. So, I know not everyone can be able to do that, but just understand what you're up against so that you can make educated decisions on whether or not you want to partner with another group, kind of what your probability of winning is, so you don't scrounge up, your last $50,000 and lose. I've seen people put everything towards it and not win a license. So you got to be really smart, and also know if you're willing, if you really want to get into the market, and if you're willing to start in maybe another state and then go to a state that you're really interested in later, that's also a possibility. So that's kind of all over the place. I apologize.
I would just say, setting aside all the specifics, like, you need to be ready to be working in an industry that changes every single day, sometimes to your benefit, sometimes not. If you are someone that likes, a known outcome, and you want to kind of have a growth plan that's going to be nice and linear, this is not the industry for you. Okay. Things change overnight. All of a sudden, state lines maybe go away, and now your neighbor's coming in and taking over. You may have a town that changes their vote. You may have, the rules around the accounting and all of this and that. Like, you can't deduct all the normal expenses you might want to deduct, all these things. It's a very, very different industry. If you're a first-time entrepreneur and you've never tried to build a business, you're basically trying to do the most difficult business you can do. So, I'm going to tell you like it is, it ain't easy, and you got to be ready to pivot. You got to be ready to change. And at the same time, you have to be super focused on what you're going to do. I'm an investor in a lot of companies, and I see these decks that are like, hey, we're going to get a license and we're going to win big. I'm like, I don't even know what you are. Are you a dispensary? Are you a manufacturer? Are you a consumption lounge? Like, what are you going to be? And you need to really understand why you're going to be awesome at that thing. And you got to be ready for 99 and a half people out of 100 to tell you no. So if you've got that fortitude at all those things, then go for it. If you don't, then find someone else who's doing this and try to get a job there, because it is a crazy rough industry. Massive upside and wonderful, to work in it, but difficult.
And I would just add, winning a license takes a lot of luck, because, we've applied probably 10 times. We've won about half the times. The first application we had was Maryland, and we won a cultivation license. We had the highest score in the state. Our applications after that only got better. We built on the Maryland application, and we've won about half the licenses that we've applied for. So, and we've put a tremendous amount of work and money into every application we do. My point is, you don't win them all. There's some arbitrariness to the scoring that's very, very frustrating. We've been involved in litigation over scoring. It's a long, hard, frustrating process. It takes luck and hard work and a little bit of talent to win these licenses.
Thank you all.
I'll echo that really quickly, because I think a lot of people, I meet a lot of people that are telling me that they are applying for things, and it is just a very difficult process. It is emotionally taxing too. You put a lot into it, and then, you may or may not win a license, and, it is a lot on you financially, emotionally, physically. It's difficult to go through. And then at the end of the day, the people grading these are people. They're not robots. Sometimes it's subjective. People get tired reading. I mean, it's just so many different things that you have to anticipate. So it's not a sport for, like Liz said, it is definitely something you have to be ready to pivot. You have to be ready to lose some, win some. And then you have to be ready to go when you're called on, or to sit down when you're not called on. So.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I think it's very important what you said, Liz, and what you just reiterated, Hope. This is a tough industry to get into. Businesses are just to be an entrepreneur and to have a successful business is a tough thing to do, but the cannabis space is a very tough one indeed. And a lot of people do think that this is, the modern gold rush and they're just going to come in and be able to make money. But because of all of the regulations and all of the complexities around that, you have to be prepared. You have to really have some reason, some kind of passion to do this. And I appreciate you guys making that known here to all those individuals who may be interested in this space. Now, my next question, Kevin, you did mention that licenses is it's kind of like a crapshoot. You're not sure exactly what the reasons are. Sometimes it looks like it's pretty subjective, but as you said, you've won half, which I think is, a pretty significantly high number of licenses to win. You're in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Virginia, but can you speak to what it takes to get a good license, and when you were, or a good license application, and when you started off, what you use? You said you use certain consultants, and what the benefits are of using consultants to, provide the best application that you can.
Yes. So we used consultants, a company called Next Big Crop, and we, well, let me back up, and if you don't mind, just tell everybody how I kind of got into this industry. I was a trial lawyer, have a law firm, been suing, a product liability, medical negligence, pharmaceutical liability plaintiff lawyer for 20 years. And I had a bunch of lawsuits against the energy drink companies like Monster and Red Bull. A 14-year-old girl died in Hagerstown from drinking some Monsters. So we put a bill in the Maryland legislature to ban the sale of energy drinks to minors. And we had a hearing in Annapolis, and we were up against the American Beverage Association, and they kicked our butts. Our bill didn't pass, but at our hearing, the lobbyist for like the 7-Elevens came in there and said, you guys are trying to ban the sale of energy drinks and it's cutting into our money. And right downstairs, they're having a hearing where they're going to legalize pot. And, I had a rough day. Our bill didn't go anywhere, but it did perk up my ears. I wanted to just hear that hearing. I wasn't a cannabis user at all, but I just wanted to hear what that was all about. So I popped into that hearing and heard how they were making it limited licenses, how it was going to be like a real opportunity, a business opportunity for those who won. And then I was able to convince my brother to, go in with me on an application. It's all consuming. I mean, you want to start early. You want to read the whole application, read the instructions, make sure you don't have anything in your background that's going to prevent you from applying. And don't assume that just because you do have something in your background that it's going to prevent you from applying. For example, a lot of the applications now actually give extra points if you have, a nonviolent cannabis conviction in your past. So, I would say read the instructions. In terms of building your team, our structure is that we have an advisory board, and on the advisory board, we have some medical doctors, we have, horticulturalists, we have, legal people, we have the highest level people of expertise of every part of the cannabis industry that we can. We have, a former Homeland Security agent for security. And we find these people, we found them on either through personal connections, through LinkedIn, through putting out Facebook posts. And, some of them let us, use their expertise for free. Some of them we paid. Some of them we gave a little bit of stock to. But honestly, we weren't offering to pay them a lot. We would offer to pay them $1,000 for up to maybe 10 hours or 20 hours of consulting for a year. And some of them we consulted with more than that, and we never paid them more. They never asked to be paid more. Some of them, we almost never consulted with. Some of them we actually ended up hiring on our full-time team, and they're with us to this day. Actually, our compliance manager was a horticulture specialist for Frederick County, basically planting the plants all around the public areas of Frederick. So we got her on as a horticulturalist, and she's risen through the ranks, and she's our compliance manager now nationally for all of our facilities. So I would say strongly consider using a consultant. Again, the consultants that we used, once we won the license, we actually hired them to come in and partner with us to run our grow for the first 2 years. We had a little falling out, and we ended our relationship with them sooner than 2 years, but they had a background of growing cannabis in Colorado, which had a longer history of being legal, and they were able to, you know, teach us how to grow, helped us with hiring, you know, and I think as we've learned, we've taken the good from them and some things that they were doing that we didn't think were the best practices, we've changed, but they were really invaluable in terms of drafting the application and helping us get started.
Awesome.
I hope I
Thank
answered
you.
your question. I don't remember the question. I feel like I'm
No,
babbling.
no, you did. You know, how you went about submitting winning applications and the use of consultants. I want to ask if Hope, you know, having won a license as well in Maryland, if you can add anything to that.
Yeah, so I've been through, yes, we won in Maryland, and I've actually, I guess, been a consultant myself on quite a few applications. Some we've won, some we haven't. And then okay, when we applied the first time, a lot of people know my story. If you don't, I won't tell it. You can Google. There's a bunch of articles and stuff about how I started. But we did use consultants. We actually hired a group that didn't help us very much, and we paid them a lot of money. And it's funny because they were working with a few people in Maryland, and they actually didn't even get their applications in on time. So with little things, like if they say the application is due at 5 o'clock on a Friday, if you get there at 5:01 to turn it in, it will not be accepted. You have to follow the directions to the T. They look for those small things, like, okay, you're supposed to put the page numbers on the right side bottom part, you know, like they will throw out your application if you don't do those small things. It's easier that way, right? If you get 1,000 applications for 5 spots, like, let's find any way to not read certain ones. You know, they didn't follow directions, they're out. So yeah, the consultant that I worked with the first time, it's funny, we kind of noticed kind of their lack of attention to detail going through the process, and we kind of took over. So my team, my mother, myself, Dr. Bryant, who is a longtime family friend, and now our general manager, Dexter Parker, I mean, the 4 of us literally, my mom's a dentist, we literally sat in her break room for probably like 5 months every day, figuring this out on our own. We didn't know what we were doing either. We ended up bringing in some subject matter experts, but I won't call them consultants per se, because they didn't necessarily write anything for us. They didn't give us any finished products, but it was more like, I'm going to give you the information you need to be able to write this. So there's kind of that route where you piece it together. I'll say that the reason we were probably successful is because I had just graduated college. I was the econ major. I was used to technical writing, and, you know, analyzing data, all of those things. So I was able to write in that type of speak. So people that have experience with like grant writing, things like that, usually are able to successfully communicate an application. It needs to have one voice. A lot of times you're dealing with a lot of people with a lot of different expertise, but you need to have one voice throughout an application. So that's a team member that's valuable in early stages, someone that is experienced in like grant writing or any type of technical writing. But yeah, with consultants, I would say very much so vet them, talk to other people that have worked with them. There's a lot of people in this industry that don't know what they're doing, but they will charge you a heap of a lot of money because they assume that you don't know either. And I would also say really look for people with experience. Like Kevin said, he used a group that had experience in Colorado, and that was how they got their entry level in. But you learn so much when you're actually operating it. So after you work with a consultant the first time, like usually you can piece things together yourself. And then I'd say, even if you are working with a consultant, they're kind of like, look, I'm going to give you a finished product and you don't really have to worry about it. I would say you need to be extremely involved in the process still. So something that I do now with people that come to me with application stuff, I won't write anyone's application for them. I just can't do that. Mentally, I can't do it. But what I will do for people is kind of what I call quarterbacking, making sure that they are getting everything they need to get done in a timely manner, and that it's organized in the way that it is, and that they are following directions. I would say that's almost, some people win simply because they can follow the directions to the T and give you exactly what the state asked for. And some people will lose and they have a much better quality of information, and they probably would run a better business, but they lose because they're not following directions. Little things like, don't put a picture in the application and you put pictures all over it, they're going to throw your application out. You were supposed to write Times New Roman 12 and you wrote in, I don't know, air, anything else. You have to really be detail oriented through the application process. And your consultants, you just have to monitor them. I would be doing, weekly calls, and a couple of weeks before the application is due, I would be talking to them all day. I was unsuccessful, but I applied in Maryland for the second round of grower and processors. And my consulting team that I worked with was in Chicago, and I actually flew to Chicago and I stayed there for a month. And every day we worked 12 hours on our application. And that level of dedication, I did not win that license. So that's just going to show, what you have to do in this industry.
Gotcha. So quick follow-up. So you said you worked every day for 12 hours for a month. Would you say that is the level of runway that you would need, about a month, if you're ready to put in those types of hours?
We had been working on the application for probably about 6 months prior to, and I had been, I guess, even before then, kind of working on things, and I was very involved in the legislative process. So I knew exactly what was going on in advance. So like Kevin said, he was kind of first introduced to it when the bill was passed. The bill was passed like 2 years almost before the actual applications opened up. But through that bill, it's going to outline how the application is going to look. So you have that opportunity even now to kind of see what an application is going to end up like, and you can be gathering information. You might not know exactly how it needs to be formatted or packaged together, but you could have a heap of information and your team prepared and all of these things prepared in advance. Usually, as long as there's some, even if it's a draft bill, you can kind of see the direction that your state is going in well in advance. So I'd say, a month before, if you just started a month before, that's not enough time. But if you're kind of like just putting together the package and putting finishing touches on it, things like that, I'd say a month is okay. But I say you need at least 6 months, especially in states that real estate is required, because that's a big deal. Finding real estate, securing it pre-licensure. For some people, that means actually going ahead, either buying a property or leasing the property in advance, and they don't even know if they're going to win. So that could be a big money sink, potentially. So a lot of states are getting rid of it because they know it's a big holdback for a lot of people, especially states that are prioritizing social equity. So depending on where you are and the type of license, you might not need that. But yeah, when real estate's involved and when you have to get drawings and things like that, this could take weeks for a company to go out and do drawings. I know in the Maryland process, I also had some environmental work done on the property that I was looking at. It took months to get some of these things done and analyzed. So it depends on the level that you are going in the application. Are you trying to pretty much submit something that says if I win tomorrow, I could turn on the faucet and everything's going to turn in, work out, or if it's just a lot of arbitrary plans? It depends.
Gotcha. Thank you for that, Hope. Wonderful.
I got one thing to add that I think
Yep.
could be helpful to new applicants. You want to make sure you have a game plan for the actual filing of the application, because it's not always as easy as you would think. You may be working up to the last minute to dot every I, cross every T, you know, try to grab a point here or there. But, you know, different states have different filing requirements. I remember in Maryland, hope you'll remember this, on our first round, we had to like submit a redacted application. Like we weren't allowed to have any names in there. And they said they were going to disqualify us if we didn't, you know, redact every single name in the app. And that took a day and a half or more to like do that the right way.
And you had to print everything. It was the first application. I remember you had to physically drop it off. I remember driving and having someone drive me, and I was still redacting in the car on the way to Baltimore. I think we finished like 2 minutes before, and I had to like run in. I mean, it was the craziest thing. And I mean, I saw they closed the door and people were like banging on the door to get, I mean, it was the craziest thing I'd ever seen.
Yeah. And with the consultants, you do need to be careful, because some of them will try to wait till the last minute and say it's your responsibility to file the application. I've heard a lot of nightmare stories. Our consultants we always had a game plan, like a month ahead of time. How are we going to get this filed? When are we going to finish? We are drop dead finished, you know, 3 days before the deadline. In Virginia, very competitive process. We had literally like a 2,000 page application, maybe 1,500, like very thick binders. And then at the last minute, well, like actually, fortunately, like 2 days before it was due, we realized that we had to have 14 copies of this like 1,000-page application. So we ended up, you know, running to a copy store, and it cost a couple $1,000s to get the apps put into binders. And then we had to drive them up to Richmond, down to Richmond. I mean, you really got to be careful about what the filing requirements are. In Pennsylvania, they only wanted it on a thumb drive. Like sometimes it's hard copy, sometimes it's thumb drive. In New Jersey, you could do either, but then if your thumb drive failed, you were screwed. So like in New Jersey, the smart thing to do was to submit a paper copy and the thumb drive. So it's just, you really got to be careful about the logistics of the actual filing.
Awesome. Great advice. You know, a lot of people just don't understand all of the details and all of the different things that you have to do to actually get the license filed, you know, let alone trying to start and run an organization. And you know, you guys have touched upon how difficult it is in the cannabis space, and I like to call this a Venn diagram of regulations, and you're sitting right in the middle of that Venn diagram, where you know it's illegal in the federal space. You can't sell across state lines. You know, the laws are constantly changing. You know, pretty soon you'll, you know, especially if you're in the grow, you'll have to have, you know, good manufacturing practices. FDA is looking to come in. There's just a ton of things that, you know, people have to be aware of when entering this space. I'd like to ask each and every one of you who have led organizations, what are 3 or so or to 5 insights that you would provide for a person who is looking to operate business in general, but you know, more specifically in the cannabis space? I'll start with you, Liz.
Sure. So, you know, if you're doing anything that involves real estate, it's twice as long and 3 times as expensive as you expect. So just build that into your model. No construction project has ever gone on time, on budget in a startup with an entrepreneur. Like, doesn't happen. So you're going to need more money, and it's going to take longer. And, you know, so you need to be prepared. You know, someone asked about, like, if I raise some money for my application and then I don't have anything left, like, you're constantly raising money. Unless you've got some like rich uncle somewhere, rich aunt somewhere, you are constantly raising money. That is, you know, the job of a CEO is to tell your story, raise money, and hire great people. If those are the 3 things you're doing, you'll be successful. If you're, you know, trying to also do 50 other things, you know, and raising money isn't at the top of your page, it's very tough. You've got to really have that capital. So I would say, you know, be prepared for things to take longer. You know, I've got an investment in a dispensary manufacturer and grow in Massachusetts, where you're allowed to have vertical integration. New York, you're not going to be allowed to have vertical integration like that. So they, it's taken 5 rounds of the inspector coming to check this, check that, the next thing, then there was a storm and it was delayed and they have to wait for the council to meet it. It's 3 more weeks. And I mean, everything takes longer. So I'd be prepared for that. And I think hire slowly, fire fast. You bring someone on and you think they're going to be great, and you start to see right out of the gate, you get that feeling in your gut that these people are really not what I thought. Drop them immediately. Do not hold on. That is like the biggest mistake every company can make, is thinking, well, this is my buddy's cousin and I gotta, don't do it. I think that's the other real big point I'd make about a startup, is it's going to take longer and you need excellent people.
Very good. Hope or Kevin?
I think, Liz's advice was awesome. I definitely had issues with real estate once I already got the license. And we bootstrapped a lot of pretty much everything in the beginning, did what we had to do to get it. But definitely you're constantly raising money. You have to be savvy. I believe in lean management, and a lot of cannabis companies are not that lean. A lot of cannabis companies, the ones that are very well capitalized, are going to like overspend times 10. If you go look at a lot of publicly traded companies, you look at the way they're spending their money, it's a little confusing. But it's not practical when you are first getting into the industry, especially pre-licensure. It's not practical. So you be as lean as possible. You can be competitive against the bigger groups. It's possible. You can beat them, you can win. And you don't have to spend all their money. You don't have to hire the best lobbyist in the state. I actually realized that, shoot, I was a better lobbyist than my own, just because once I started getting the relationships with legislators, I could call their offices and get a meeting. I didn't need someone else to do that for me, but it took effort. It depends on the level of effort you're willing to put in up front. And for me, it was different. I was able to focus on this full time even before we had a license, because I was 22 and could live on my mom's couch and didn't need an income. I could do that. So I was able to be at every meeting, go everywhere, knock on people's doors, be annoying. I was able to do those things. You may not be in the same position, so you might have to hire someone to do that for you. So yeah, just assess your risk, raise money. You're going to be constantly trying to figure that out. It's hard. You cannot go get a loan from the bank, but you can do things like, we bought our building where our dispensary is, and we were able to do that because we created another entity for real estate, and we were able to go out and get a traditional bank loan from a bank that was working with cannabis companies. So we didn't have to lie about the use or anything like that. It is possible. Like Jacqueline earlier was saying, there are companies out there that will, insure you and do that. You have to vet through a lot of things. I would not suggest the route of like not telling your bank what you do, or I wouldn't suggest that at all. But there are people that will work with you, probably for a small, like I like to call the green tax. There's always a little bit of green tax for working with a cannabis company, because these companies that work with you for lending and insurance and all of that are putting themselves at a slight risk because of the Schedule 1 status. So, yeah.
Go ahead, Kevin.
I would just generally say you need to make decisions quickly in cannabis, and you need to be decisive, and don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Make the best decisions you can, and then move on and live with your decisions. And you can't keep going back to things when you have a limited time frame and you're doing an application. Somebody's got to make the final decision. This is the way we're going to do this section. We're not going to come back to this and deal with this again. We've got to move on. I would reiterate, get capital when you can, get more capital than you think you're going to need. Your lawyer's bills are going to be more than you want them to be. You're going to be pissed off, but it's just part of the game. Unless, of course, you use Offit Kurman. Their bills are very, very fair. I've seen John Wack's bills, and he is a very, very fair biller. Another, I'm just throw some, I'm assuming some people out there are like planning on applying, and that's kind of the stage you're in. With regard to real estate, a good option, if you can't afford to buy the real estate, you know, and take the risk, like who the hell wants to own a dispensary if you're not going to win the dispensary license, is to do a option to lease. You could get, you know, you could hire Wax to draft a option to lease where you pay the landlord maybe $5,000, $10,000 to hold the property, take the property off the market, hold it for you. And there's a legal condition. If you win the license and get approval from MMCC, then you enter into the lease agreement. So that's something that I think everybody, you know, should consider if you're going to actually try to tie down a property for part of the application. My last thing I'll say is be careful about who your partners are and who your investors are. You know, when we go into a market, for example, Virginia, we are not from Virginia. We felt that to have the strongest app, we needed to partner with somebody local from Virginia. So we partnered with 3 wonderful ladies who had a, you know, corporate entity in Virginia. They were leaders in the community. They knew all the politicians and everything. We won the license. And then there's an issue. Once you win a license, you have to raise a ton of capital. We had to raise, you know, $20 million. And our legal documents weren't exactly clear who was responsible for like raising that money and how much money were they going to have to contribute? How much were we going to have to contribute? And it led to us, you know, butting heads pretty aggressively. We worked it out and we're all friends now, kumbaya, but be careful who your partners are because it always gets complicated. We've had partners in several markets and it just gets complicated. So I would get lawyers involved to help you draft the agreements and always make sure your agreements address who's responsible for raising capital. If they can't raise their capital, does their equity get reduced? Like that kind of thing. And those are my suggestions. That's it.
Awesome. Very good suggestions. I completely appreciate it. I'm sure the audience members do as well. So I just wanted to note that Liz informed us that in New York, in New Jersey, the property requirements are eliminated. So that should make things slightly easier, at least in New York and in New Jersey. Let me shift over to the, you know, we've been talking about this and talking around it, financing. You know, I hope you talked about being able to go to a financial institution. A lot of times they will be local institutions within your bank, but the access to funding is limited. And you're talking about a industry that, you know, even before you get your license, you have to have funding. First, I want to ask, how much should you budget for? And Kevin, you talked a little bit about, you know, your process in getting the funding, but I'd like to hear from you, Hope. What was your process in getting your initial funding, especially considering, you know, the conversation about bootstrapping and keeping things very lean?
Yeah. Okay, so I can tell you about 2 different experiences that I've been through. And the first license, we had no idea what we were doing. We had no idea what to, you know, how much money we really needed. So there was no time that we had like a budget planned out and then we put that money in our company bank account and then we went, that's not how it went for us. We kind of were like paying bills as they came up, and between myself, my mother, and Dr. Bryant, and not like I had very much to offer financially at that time, but we just would pay a bill when it came. We didn't even have a legal entity formed until like maybe 2 months before we put in our first application. So we kind of, I mean, we really just pieced it together the best we could. But then fast forward to, you know, we have experience, we understand the industry, all that good stuff. And we applied in that second round in Maryland. And like I said, I've also applied with a bunch of different people in a bunch of other states and have small amounts of equity in a lot of different licenses. I felt very confident applying in Maryland, you know, my home state where I had a lot of recognition and all these things. I felt very confident. We hired a group out of Chicago, like I said, that had won a bunch of licenses. I raised $500,000 for that project. We created a new entity, and we created a holding company, a parent company that would own this new entity that would potentially own our grow and processing. And then we had the entity that owned our dispensary license under there as well. So we raised money through a brand new entity. I had 2 investors and I raised $500,000. They got, we pretty much had a win and lose scenario from that. So even if we lost, they would own a small portion of our dispensary, which is what ended up happening. That made it a little bit easier for me to raise money. I had leverage. I had something to offer that was making revenue. It's hard to raise money when you don't have a physical business just yet. So you have to find a way. If you were going to raise money pre-licensure, I know Kevin talked about, you know, working with family and friends, but I'd say find ways to build value even before you have a license. And that could mean simply being extremely organized, having somewhat of a data room in advance. You know, those things make you look more attractive to an investor rather than like, hey, I want to apply for this license and I think it's a good idea. And the market, you know, all the market analysis says that it's going to be a $1 billion market in a year. Like, okay, that sounds good, but why would you win a license? You know, so I would say having a kind of that package of a company together in advance sounds good. And like Liz put in the chat, even these states that are not requiring a location, I would advise you to still look for one. Even if you don't secure it in any way, shape, or form. I mean, but securing it will make you more competitive and you'll be able to have more plans that seem real. You know, like when a grader is reading an application, and I am friends with plenty of people that have graded applications, and I've kind of seen that process. I was asked to be on Ohio's group, and I didn't end up doing it because I was a part of I decided to apply there with a group. But it is, when you're reading an application and they're saying, like, showing you where it would actually go on a drawing of the actual building, that is much more compelling than like, when I get this license, I will put cameras in all of these locations that I don't even know where they are yet. So yeah, and even if it's not a requirement, I can guarantee there will be plenty of companies that have secured their properties already. And what Kevin suggested about like the option to lease or the option to purchase, I did that in Maryland as well. But I don't know if you remember me saying before, I had done environmental studies. I got actual EMP drawings done of my building. I mean, I went kind of hard in Maryland, if I'm being honest. And I spent that whole $500,000. I spent $500,000 and I could have just lit that money on fire instead. So it's definitely, it's something you got to just consider, like how far you're going to go with this. If you even need to do that in Maryland, I think I needed to do that. I was close, but I didn't win. There were only 4 cultivation spots. So it was just a super competitive process. But I needed to do that to be competitive in Maryland. Granted, you know, there are people who win in states like that. Like, you'll do all those things and then people will win and then you'll hear their story and they'll say like, oh, I spent $20,000 and I didn't even, I mean, like Kevin said, a little bit of it is luck, but I don't want you to feel like if you don't put in the time and effort that you won't, that you still don't have a chance. You definitely do. And sometimes it's necessary, but I'd say kind of like wage that risk.
Right. And I think also to add to that, you know, you get the experience. If you could potentially, you know, apply at a later time when applications reopen up or maybe in a different jurisdiction. So, you know, the investment is also definitely worth it.
That Maryland license, I've never learned so much about, you know, being organized, technical writing, actual cultivation techniques and SOPs and things like that. I mean, that lesson I don't know if it was worth $500,000, but I know that, you know, upcoming in Maryland, I feel 20 times more prepared. And also like I would need to spend, you know, 5 times less the money as well to do it. So yeah, you definitely, even when you lose, you're
Yeah.
learning a lot.
Very good. All right, Liz, I know you've ran a successful crowdfunding campaign, and crowdfunding is something that is, you know, blown up. Everybody knows about it. Everybody's interested. But a lot of people are familiar with, you know, how difficult it is, all of the legal aspects of it, and especially when you're considering cannabis and the fact that it is still not legal on a federal level. So could you talk to us about your campaign that you ran and what it takes to run a campaign, and some of the complexities that people may not be aware of?
Sure. So first of all, I think you need to understand that there are two different, broadly speaking, two different types of crowdfunding. There's the crowdfunding that you do on Indiegogo and Kickstarter, where it's like, oh, I have this new kind of headphone or something, and I'm essentially getting people to pay me up front so I can go manufacture those headphones. And they're basically buying it at a discounted price to what I will sell it for in the future, right? They're not getting any equity in the company. They're getting a reward, which is the headphones that they're going to get 6 months down the road, right? And so that's the traditional crowdfunding. There's also the GoFundMe, like my dog needs surgery, I need $500. Can everybody help me and chip in $10, right? Like that's one kind of crowdfunding. You don't have to have financials. You don't have to have a business plan. You don't need to do any of these things. You don't need to have really anything at all from a regulatory standpoint. In equity crowdfunding, which is what I did with Good Earth Organics, we raised $3 million from about 1,800 individual investors. You have to use, if you want like regular people, which are, you know, people who are not considered accredited investor, and an accredited investor has some things like they make more than $200,000 a year for a couple of years in a row, or they have $1 million in liquid assets, not including real estate, or, you know, rich people is what accredited investor means in everyday language, right? So if you want to raise money from everyday people, you have to use there's all these rules and regulations. So you essentially need to go to a platform that has done all of the steps with a broker dealer and all these things to meet regulatory requirements of the SEC. So there are a bunch of different platforms. Seed Invest is the one that we used. It's one of the bigger. They've got, you know, thousands and thousands of successful campaigns. They've got hundreds of thousands of people on the platform, you know, all this thing. And we still have to provide 2 years of audited financials, and you know, every claim we make, if we say there are 19 legal states for adult use, we have to provide a source, third party. If we say, you know, these are the people that work at the company, we have to show their LinkedIn profiles and pay stubs, and, you know, like you just can't make things up. So if you can do all of those things, great, now you're at the starting line. And crowdfunding is what I like to say. I worked at Indiegogo for about almost 3 years, and people think crowdfunding is about raising money. Crowdfunding is not about raising money. Crowdfunding is about getting your story out there, doing marketing, pressure testing an idea, deciding, you know, in the case of the headphones, do people want the red ones or the blue ones? You know, like, yes, you also raise money, but just like we learned as kids, money doesn't grow on trees. It doesn't grow on crowdfunding platforms either. This is a big myth, right? It also takes money to make money. So if you imagine, you hear about a new restaurant in your neighborhood, and you've heard the chef is awesome and the cocktails are amazing and the food is, you know, blessed by nuns and grown organically and all these things. And you show up at that restaurant and you see no people eating inside that restaurant. It does not matter that you've heard all that. You do not go in and eat, right? Like, you want to see other people. So successful crowdfunding means on day 1 or 2, you can bring loads of people who already know you to your campaign so that random people see your campaign and say, wow, these guys are excited. They have traction. They've raised money in the first few days. There's lots of people talking about that. If you can't do that out of the gate, if you're starting from scratch and you don't have an email list or friends or anybody who's going to put anything in, strangers are not going to believe in you. If your mom doesn't believe in you, strangers are not going to believe in you, right? Like this is the facts. And it costs a lot of money if you need to get strangers. So for us, we were able to get a few people to contribute some money up front, maybe, $50, $60, $100,000, but we raised $3 million. How did we do that? We advertised on Facebook. You know what that costs? A freaking fortune is what it costs. So not only did we launch, at the beginning of the entire 2020 election, then we had a pandemic that shut all shopping down. So online advertising went through the roof. If you're going to raise money, you have to have the capital to advertise your campaign. It will be worth it. If I said to you, give me $1 today and I'll give you $3 a month from now, you would do it, but you have to have the $1 today. So crowdfunding can be super successful, but it's almost never successful for a startup. The company that I did it for, we have a 12-year operating history, audited financials, existing customers, all these things. And we're trying to go from being a little business in Oregon, like this little picture here, to a national brand, right? And so we needed to raise that capital. So, I don't want to be Debbie Downer here, but it is extremely difficult and it's expensive to do crowdfunding. So most people are not going to raise their capital that way at the beginning. Later, when you're trying to expand and you've got some traction to talk about, it can be a good tool.
Very good.
Liz, can you not crowdfund for plant touching businesses?
So that was the other thing. So we obviously are ancillary. We make soil and nutrients and that kind of thing. There are certain, so crowdfunding on a registered broker dealer platform that's, run by the SEC is not going to allow a plant touching business for sure. There are private platforms that you can do accredited investor type things with for plant touching, but you're absolutely right. So maybe you could somehow raise money for a building or something like that. I also want to quickly touch
get
on
creative with structures.
Yeah, so we are a business that's for 12 years made soil. I mean, this is literally like dirt in bags. We've gone through 3 banks. We don't touch the plant, but people don't want to even know that our customer might touch the plant, right? And these are licensed customers in a mature state like Oregon. And so I highly recommend whatever banking relationship you get, banking, insurance, et cetera, that they're in the cannabis industry. It's a cash business, so we couldn't get one of those banks or we'd be driving our cash every day 6 hours to reach that bank because we're kind of in the middle of nowhere. But I think this is a very important point, is your banking relationship. If your bank goes away overnight and you're screwed. I mean, we've had to go through 3 banks and in the middle of our crowdfunding even. So it's a challenge that is not to be, even for an ancillary business.
Very good. Go ahead, Kevin.
Just a practical pointer. If you're starting a business in Maryland, your best bet is just to use Severn Bank, which I think is now like Shore Bank, because they accept cannabis. You can be totally honest with them and you'll save yourselves a lot of headache. I mean, we started with, we got kicked out of a couple of banks. We got,
Same. And that's where I got my mortgage for our building from, Severn Bank as well. So
Badge of honor if you get kicked out of a bank. So just, remember that.
Yeah, I got denied a mortgage.
I actually had I got kicked out a personal account closed once. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay, I'm just keeping track of time. Okay, so we're at about 1:15. I want to quickly talk to you guys about the importance of a team. So, we've again touched upon this as well. Kevin, you talked about the various different people that you worked with, consultants that you brought on as a team to be part of your team. Part of the application in whenever it is that you're looking for funding. And obviously when you're running your organization, it is run by your team members. Liz, you talked about, hiring and firing fast. So the people that you have on the ground doing the work is very important. Can you guys talk to me about where you go, what you do, how to determine who to place on your team?
I'm going to jump in first because unfortunately I sort of have a hard stop coming up in a couple of minutes. But I would say it's really, there are people now who've been working in this industry, and it is really important that you bring people into your team who have done this before. Every other application out there is, as these guys have said, you're competing against those other folks. And so if you've never done a cultivation, or you've never run a retail dispensary, or you've never done any kind of manufacturing, and your whole team comes from all other industries, I think you're going to it's going to be very difficult to compete, because there's, 30 states now that have some form of this business. And so there's a lot more people with experience than there was 5 years ago. And so building your team with folks who already speak the language and know the pros and cons of a particular approach, understand like your HVAC system in your grow has to be done a certain way, and being able to put that into your application, or know that in a dispensary in Massachusetts, entrance and egress have to be in 2 different locations, whatever. These are things, there are so many things that you can't even imagine, that you don't even know that you don't know, that bringing some people in with some experience, because there are a lot more than there used to be, I would say is like the most important thing you could do.
Thank you, Liz. Anyone else? Kevin, Cole? No.
I think, I guess maybe this is getting ahead of ourselves, but it's really important at some point, once you get a license, the business will grow so fast that you hire a great HR person and hire a great CFO. I think I'm talking more on if you have multiple licenses in multiple states. Like my brother and I, as founders, we pretty much did everything for the first 2 years, and we found ourselves doing things that we weren't the best at. And you quickly have to learn that and be honest with yourself. What are your best skill sets? And you want to focus your time doing what you do best and hire people to do the other things. And something that we still struggle with is delegating and letting go of the responsibility. You have to hire great people and have trust in them. So that's
and that can go into the application process too. Like if you're currently a HR professional, you can be the founder and not the CEO. That's possible on an application, and people might actually appreciate you putting yourself in a box where your expertise lies, and I think, and you can still be a founder. You could be the chairman of your board and not be the CEO if you don't have that level of expertise, or if you just know, I'm not really an implementer. And for a startup business, your CEO has to be more than just a visionary. They have to be an implementer. They have to literally, like Kevin said, he was doing everything in the beginning. I physically worked in my store for a year. Like you might have gotten checked out by me, but I was also raising money, and I was also talking to our attorneys. I was also traveling and speaking. I was playing like 10 different roles in the beginning. Now, I don't really work in the business and I work on it, but it took years for me to get there. So yeah, find where your strengths are, but know you're going to have to be fluid and flexible in application processes. Please lean on your current level of expertise, and then find people to fill those holes. Even if they're just advisory board members, like Kevin said, you don't have to hire or give everyone a title. They can just be on an advisory board, and you can kind of piece that together. But you can create an org chart of what you want your company to look like and the positions you would like to hire. And yes, you might even be able to fill people in those roles for the application. And you can kind of say that they are, what is the right word? Like transitionary people or something that, you know, you can write an application. This person has this level of expertise and we're going to hire this HR firm to find someone that fills the position permanently, but they're going to stay on for a year and help train this person. Like things like that make your application look good too.
All right, I want to give a big thank you to Liz. Thank you for all that you have done to help us and all the valuable insights that you've provided here today. I appreciate it. All right, well, I'll let you go.
Sorry about that. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm Liz Wald. I'm on Liz Wald on everything, Twitter, LinkedIn, you name it, Facebook, I'm there. So thanks everybody, and apologies I have to jump, but feel free to reach out. Great job, Mac.
All right, thank you, Liz.
Thanks, Liz.
All right, so we have a couple more. We got about 10 minutes. I do have some more questions, but I want to just open it up to see if there's any questions. Anyone has any questions that they would like to ask in the audience? And we have answered a few that were written, but just want to see if anyone has any questions for our panelists. Okay, feel free to write something down and I'll be able to write it, read it to you guys. But going along with my question here for you guys is on marketing. Liz talked about how, you know, running a successful crowdfunding campaign is about the story that you tell. I believe that's the same thing when it comes to marketing your organizations. It's particularly tough to market, you know, a plant touching cannabis company. You know, a lot of the different platforms will not allow you to advertise. You can't really do anything on Instagram, on any of the social platforms. What do you guys do to get the word out about your company and to increase sales and revenue?
The first thing you have to do is look at the state regulations on advertising in every market that you're in, because they can be quite different. For example, in Pennsylvania, we're not allowed to do any advertising at all. In Maryland, they just changed the rules, and we have some leeway, but we have to have disclaimers on every ad. We push the envelope. You know, we always comply with the regulations, but we do post stuff on Facebook and Instagram. We've gotten kicked off of Facebook. We've gotten let back on Facebook. We've got like 10,000 or more followers on Facebook. So it sucks when we get kicked off. But like, if you don't post pricing information or anything about like actually selling cannabis, you can promote your company, your brand effectively on social media. I'm talking Facebook and Instagram, legally and compliantly in Maryland. On the dispensary level, I'll let Hope address that for the most part, but we use text messaging. We have our patients opt into text messaging and send them messages about our specials. This is interesting also, like Maryland is so competitive at the dispensary level, like we're all offering sales every day. So it's challenging. Our margins are slim in Maryland on the dispensary level because, first of all, we have 280E to deal with, which basically means that at the dispensary level, you cannot deduct the ordinary and necessary business expenses of just about everything except for the cost of goods sold. So like your bud tenders, your security, your marketing people, you cannot deduct their salaries or anything. So it makes it harder to make true EBITDA, true profit at the dispensary level. And in Maryland, where it's so competitive and we're all offering these specials because, interesting, because Maryland allows advertising. So that's why we offer all these specials. In a market like Ohio or Pennsylvania, where they don't allow the specials, the margins are a lot higher and the dispensaries are making a lot more money because they don't have to discount everything. And a significant subset of the patients, they discount shop. They're looking for the best deal. They're going to drive to whatever dispensary is giving them 25% off whatever they want to buy on that particular day. I think it's getting more and more competitive as we have the MSOs coming in and owning these dispensaries. They're like offering discounts, and then the smaller shops are, sometimes offering discounts where you're actually selling product at a loss just to get people in your door, hoping that they're gonna buy other stuff. So that's a point I want to make. The last point I want to make is I think we've talked about a lot of the challenges coming into this market, but I do see some advantages of coming into the market as a social equity applicant. When Hope and I came into this market, we really had no access to capital, and we had no choice but to sell a significant amount of equity and to give the investors a good deal so that they would come in and we had the money to fund our companies. The debt that was available to us, like no banks were going to lend us any money at 4 or 5%. We did a debt deal at it's an effective rate of 16% per year. But those rates are, well, as a social equity applicant, first of all, a lot of the states are going to have funds to help you get started. And a lot of the states that are moving to adult use, the structure is that they may allow the current license holders to get early access to the adult use market, but charge the early license holders $1 million, $2 million. And that $1 million or $2 million is going into a fund to help capitalize the social equity businesses. So nobody knows exactly what that's going to look like, but don't get discouraged. I think that you all will have access to capital cheaper than we did. You're not going to have to sell as much equity as we did. We were forced to we were running out of money, the whole nightmare situation. We were worried if we were going to survive. We had to do a REIT transaction, where we entered into a building we owned. We sold it to IIPR and entered into a long-term lease, like a 30-year lease, I think, with it's a 15% interest rate. It goes up 3% a year. So it's a really lousy deal that we're stuck in for 30 years. And the MSOs are all financing with these sale leasebacks. So y'all have an advantage against the MSOs, the big companies, because you're not going to have to do those deals. And we're going to be stuck paying, these tremendous interest rates for the next 20 years. And y'all may be able to get loans from banks or from the social equity funds at a much more favorable interest rate. So I see a huge opportunity there. And I hope nobody gets discouraged. I mean, it is a challenging industry, but I love it. I love waking up every day. I get a curveball thrown to me every day, and you just, deal with it. There's great people, and I know we're helping people, and it's just very, very exciting.
I'm going to jump in real quickly, Hope. So we have about 3 minutes left. Hopefully, you did touch upon, the MSOs and how it may be a little bit easier in terms of financing. I hope that answers Teresa Gervasoni's question, because she was asking about, specifically in New Jersey, but there are a number of things that you could do in New Jersey. I want to, because we have just 3 minutes left, ask you guys, because what I'm getting here and what I hope everyone understands is that, this is not a walk in the park. This is, if you are willing to do the work, it is exciting, it is rewarding, but it is going to be hard work. I think, the fact that it is, a little bit tougher means that there are a lot of people who will not be able to enter the market, and that should make it a little better for you if you are one of those individuals who's willing to take on the challenge. This is what I'm hearing here. That way you don't have a lot of competition from those who aren't willing to take on the challenge. That said, there's a lot of psychology involved in entrepreneurship, a lot of self-development. I want to ask you this final question. What books do you guys recommend on a self-development level, on a business level, that would help people to get to the point when they can be tough enough to enter this market?
From a business standpoint, I really liked, like I said, I definitely practiced lean management. So I really like any book about Six Sigma. I was I used to be super into EOS. So any Gino Wickman book, he coined this management system called Entrepreneurial Operating System, EOS, and like has a few books on it. Traction is a book that a lot of people read. I like that book. Yeah, I'm trying to think of like self-development books and stuff. There's a book called Mindset that I liked that just helped me kind of refocus. But I may not be the best person to tell you these things, because remember, I was 22 when I first started. I was 25 when articles started being written about me, and I was like 27, 26 or so when the store opened. I was young and I had a lot of personal development to do and still doing. So yeah, my level of, I really had to kind of evaluate, because I had no idea the level of sophistication I was entering into this business. I didn't know I was going to be in an industry that took all of this. And I didn't know that I'd be sitting next to Kevin's and people that were much more experienced than me. So I had to do, I went through like a little mental breakdown, probably from like 26 till probably about like the beginning of the pandemic. Who am I? What am I? How can I do this? What am I thinking? Like, I'm over my head, so anybody that's young on here, please reach out to me. This is a difficult industry. People who are extremely successful in other industries, multi-millionaires, fail in cannabis. So, for you to be a young person attempting to swim in these waters, like it's mentally difficult. So I definitely suggest like therapy. I'm not trying to make it seem like it's that crazy, but I mean, we have to take care of ourselves mentally because it's extremely taxing. So.
Thank you, Hope. Kevin? Books?
My favorite business book is Winning by Jack Welch. He was the CEO of GE. It's just got a lot of good management techniques, the way to look at things. But honestly, I can't read these days because I'm looking at documents all day. So I need to do podcasts. For cannabis podcasts, I like Marijuana Today. I listen to that every week. And then there's another one called Canna Insider that I listen to every week as well.
Awesome. Thank you all. Thank you, Hope. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Jacqueline. Thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate your time. This was so great. This is the type of information I think we don't get very much everywhere. This is like, beginning, useful, detailed information. I appreciate your time. Hopefully I'll be able to repay you guys back someday. Thank you. And thank you all for joining us here today for our next session of Growth Theory.
Thank you, Mac, and Hope. It's a privilege to be on the
Thank
panel.
you.
With you.
Same, Kevin, same.
I'll see
Thank you. Take care.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.